Posted by you/technical review 791. My 25F, soon-to-be ex-boyfriend, 28M, and I have been living together for the past few months after dating for about 3 years. We both work full-time, but he makes significantly more than I do, probably close to 3 times as much. I honestly couldn't tell you exactly how much he earns because he's very secretive about his income. We split our bills, with him paying about 60%. Even so, it's tight for me, but I've been making it work. I have no savings. When we moved in together, we each brought our own belongings. I had my bed, and he had his. He also had a couch. Our plan was to use his larger bed as ours and put mine in the guest room. We weren't planning to keep his couch forever. We agreed to buy a new one later because I couldn't afford a deposit, first month's rent, moving expenses, and a couch all at once. Before moving day, he threw out his bed and couch, deciding he wanted new furniture. He had a bedbug scare after visiting his grandmother, whose home had bedbugs. He thought he brought them back to his apartment, though it turned out he didn't, so I understood why he got rid of them. Here's where things got frustrating. He knew I couldn't afford new furniture at the time and would need time to save up, so he agreed to cover the cost, with me repaying him in monthly increments. However, he ended up purchasing a very expensive mattress and a new couch. I helped pick them out, but I repeatedly told him that if he chose such costly pieces, it would take me a long time to pay back my share. He went ahead anyway, and I gave him a realistic budget for what I could afford to pay monthly on top of rent and other bills. While I recognize he has spent more than I have, I'm living beyond my means with our current financial arrangement. We've argued about this, and he claims that I should do whatever he asks because he's been so generous financially. He often makes trivial or unreasonable demands. For instance, one evening, I got home early after an exhausting week and was relaxing on the couch when he came home. As he opened the fridge, he asked, "Will you make me a snack?" I was irritated. After all, he was already standing at the fridge, so I said no. He became extremely upset, and it turned into a massive argument. He accused me of being ungrateful for his financial support, and that all he's asking is for me to be nice to him. I told him I wasn't going to do everything he wanted just because he earns more. I pointed out that it's unfair for him to use my financial situation to control me. That's when he said something that shocked me. He said I'm not equal to him because I'm a woman and he's a man, and I should simply obey him without attitude. This wild take set me off. I told him I couldn't do this anymore and wanted to move out. He's told me many times he can afford to live here without me, so I assumed it wouldn't be an issue. There were other reasons I decided to end things, such as frequent boundary crossing, rude name-calling, and borderline physical abuse. He likes to playfully pin me on the floor, bite, grab, or immobilize me, calling it playful, but it makes me furious. I've made it very clear how much I dislike it. Now, I'm essentially holed up in the guest bedroom, trying to find a way out. I have no savings, and living with him has drained me financially. Staying here longer will only worsen things. My family lives hours away in another state, and I can't leave my job without notice. I've been looking for affordable places nearby, but it's an odd time of year to rent, and there aren't many options. I feel trapped and on the verge of losing my mind. Any advice would be greatly appreciated. Update 2 days later. It's 2 days later, and I have officially moved out of state. To all those saying he is physically and financially abusive, you were correct. The night after I posted this, he came into the spare bedroom where I was sleeping and woke me up at 1 o'clock in the morning. He grabbed my phone from the bed and stormed off with it. I followed him and tried for a few minutes to get my phone back. Eventually, I retrieved it, but he followed me back downstairs, then upstairs, then back downstairs again. He kept trailing me, grabbing my wrists and attempting to pin me to the floor or bed. He picked me up and tried to carry me out of the house while I yelled at him to stop and just let me go back to sleep. When I returned to the bed downstairs to sleep because it was the middle of the night, he jumped into the bed after undressing himself. He wrapped his arms and legs around me, immobilizing me, and then tried to bite me. While trying to push him off, I accidentally poked him in the eye. I swung my arms as much as I could while pinned by his arms, legs, and full body weight. He didn't stop until I screamed at him that I wanted nothing to do with him and to leave me the F alone. At that point, he became furious, got up, and said that if that's how I felt, I could get the F out right now. He then went to the closet where my clothes were hanging and began pulling them out. I tried to stop him, pulling his arm away from the hangers, and he stumbled back into the closet door. He continued shouting that I could leave and should find somewhere else to stay or go to a hotel. I broke down sobbing, completely drained, both mentally and physically, after about an hour of trying to get him to leave me alone. Around 2 a.m., I called my mom, sobbing, and told her I needed to come home and needed help. I explained what was happening while my ex stood over me in the guest bedroom, watching me as I sat on the bed. When he realized I was talking to my mom, he quickly changed his demeanor and told her, "I'm really sorry you're dealing with this. She's going through nicotine withdrawal and is treating me like crap." Through sobs, I yelled at him to leave me the F alone and to go away. At some point, he began recording me on his phone. This continued for a while. My mom stayed on the phone with me as my ex stood in the guest room. I eventually attempted to go upstairs onto our back deck to talk to my mom without him hovering. He followed me, still acting like an innocent victim. I started yelling again, telling him to leave me alone. Finally, he became irritated enough and said he'd go elsewhere for the time being. He packed a bag and said he'd give me time to move out. My mom remained on the phone the whole time, and my ex maintained a calm tone, acting as though he'd been rational and composed the entire time while I was visibly upset. While he gathered his things, my dad woke up, and my mom filled him in on the situation. My dad immediately said he was going to call the police. My ex overheard and said, "That's crazy," then left about 20 minutes later, throwing his house key at me as he went. My parents did call the police, who arrived about 15 minutes after my ex left. I explained what had happened, and they informed me that my ex had already called them before my parents did. He told them I had attacked him, hit him several times in the face, both open and closed-handed, and even claimed I had punched him. I showed the officer a red mark on my wrist from when my ex grabbed me, but the officer said there wasn't anything visible and no legitimate reason to remove either of us from the home. He explained that my ex could return if he wished, but we would have to avoid interacting. He added that affidavits with our statements would be submitted to the court, which would decide if charges would be filed against either of us. The officer left but returned with a domestic violence resource pamphlet. He also asked me to hand over the key my ex had thrown at me. I complied, and the officer explained that my ex had been sitting down the street from the house and would return soon. The officer instructed me to stay on the guest bedroom level while my ex stayed on the top level, and we were to avoid each other entirely. I agreed. My ex returned shortly afterward. I went back to bed downstairs, staying on the phone with my mom for the rest of the night, attempting to sleep but only dozing for brief moments. In the morning, my ex came downstairs, the level that was supposed to be off limits to him per our agreement with the officer. I overheard him on the phone with the reporting center for abuse of adults or children. He gave them my name and information and mentioned my sister's name, and I heard him say something about violence in that family. About 20 minutes later, he came downstairs again while I was packing. I told him to go back upstairs and leave me alone. He responded, "I will. Just so you're aware, I'm having a PFA, protection from abuse order, filed against you, so I need to know when your parents will be here so I can let my attorney know." I ignored him, and he went back upstairs. As I continued packing, he came downstairs yet again. While I was in the guest bedroom changing, he pushed the door open, it wasn't completely latched, and asked again when I would be leaving. I told him to get the F out, that he could see I was changing, and to stop coming downstairs. He replied, "I need to know what date you'll be leaving so I can file the PFA. Once I file it, you can't be here." I sarcastically said, "Okay, great." He then walked back upstairs. My mom and dad discussed how his behavior seemed to be an intimidation tactic. I questioned why he claimed to be so afraid of me that he needed a protection order, yet felt comfortable repeatedly coming downstairs to confront me and walking around loudly on the phone. It felt like he was baiting me. Eventually, my parents arrived. They had called the police beforehand to request an officer to meet them at the house since my ex was still there. My ex, of course, spoke calmly with the officer, saying he'd leave so we could move my belongings. He added that he only asked for us to lock up when we were done. The officer stayed outside while we packed my things, which took about 2 hours. Once everything was loaded, I told the officer the house was locked, the key was left by the door, and I would be returning to my home state. I then went to my office building. I had talked with my supervisor earlier that morning about the situation. She was understanding and assured me they would pay out my sick leave and PTO to cover the next 4 weeks. She also said that my position would be reserved if I decided to return. I thanked her profusely, apologizing for the abrupt departure, especially from a job I had loved and planned to stay at long term. Now, I'm back in my home state with my parents and siblings, and I feel like I'm living in a fever dream. None of it feels real. This has been the worst 24 to 48 hours of my life. I'm dreading what's to come if I have to go to court, if my ex actually files for a PFA, or if the court believes his statement and files charges against me. I don't know what will happen next, but I'm out, and I'm safe.